انت خد الصغار وروح.
وانا اروح.
Okay. That was from Tel Aviv. Sorry about the focus. It's on autofocus here. Air raid sirens are going on and on. Okay, here we got another Iron Dome coming up. Rising, rising, rising. You can't see it. Almost tilting this at a 90-degree angle above my head. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
And the president is also keeping a watchful eye on the growing tension and violence in the Middle East. Israeli
Palestinians are left queuing in line for buckets, a system where an American Jewish person who's lived their whole life abroad can travel to Israel to retire without concern, while a Palestinian who goes abroad even for a few years for graduate studies is worried about losing their residency. We can't look at every single instance, every single violation in isolation. Instead, we need to consider the system of oppression under which Palestinians are living. And the right word to describe that system is the crime of apartheid.
Apartheid. And let me show you what's happening in Gaza. This happened within the last 24 hours. Let's bring up the video with the bombing of the car.
What should I say? What should I say? This is a crime. They were civilians, a woman, her children, a barber and a shop owner. These are the people who were at the scene. They didn't hit a militant nor an official. We are civilians sleeping at our homes.
Looking at our YouTube comments, there's a lot of comments that are pro-Israel, and there's a lot of comments that are free Palestine. Everyone seems to see this from their own perspective. But as the fighting's happening down in Gaza, Harry Fawcett from Al Jazeera is reporting that Israeli troops are moving toward the border there. Can you guys comment on what's happening in Gaza? Noor?
Sure. I think
Okay.
I would be happy to say that basically what we're seeing right now is first and foremost a result of intentional escalation on the side of Israel for the past month, a little more than a month. There have been a series of decisions, first in attacking people that were in prayer or in fast in Damascus Gate, attacking them during Iftar. After that, or at the same time, there's the attack on Sheikh Jarrah that we've seen. We've also seen the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque that drew people from across Palestine to show solidarity. And only then, when Hamas started firing rockets at Israel, at civilians in Israel, did Israel choose to respond with great force, killing so far about 50 people, of them about 14 children, and that's within the past 2 or 3 days. These are terrible, terrible crimes. To add to that, I want to mention that these images that you were just showing are images that most Israelis don't really get to see. They're missing from Israeli media. They're not part of what we see here. If you open Israeli newspapers or news editions, you would see the rocket fire from Gaza that has so far killed about 5 Israelis, but hardly any images from Gaza where dozens of Palestinians have been killed by Israel. And that is just twisting the way that most Israelis perceive the situation and think of themselves, ourselves, as the main victim of the situation.
What do you make of the timing? This is happening at the end of Ramadan with aid coming in the next 24 hours. And how much does this have to do with Netanyahu's own political struggles? These
I think
complications.
Netanyahu's political struggles are very, very central to this. Just to contextualize, Netanyahu has basically lost his opportunity to form a coalition government. A few days ago, it was very, very likely that within the coming few days, we would have seen a new government being formed across extreme right-wing, moderate right-wing, center-left, and Palestinian parties. A very, very strange coalition was expected to be formed that would oust Netanyahu. Basically, these moves were perfectly timed, really to the day, to lead to the situation where that potential coalition has completely fallen apart by now. The chances of that being created are very much diminished. And right now, the chances, because of this escalating violence, because what we're seeing also in terms of mob attacks and lynches of Palestinians by Jews, of Jews by Palestinians throughout the land right now, in addition to what's happening in Gaza, that government will not be formed. There will either be a right-wing government or we will go into a 5th round of elections sometime soon.
Noor?
5th round of elections sometime soon.
Noor?
And can I, I want to tell you that every time there are elections in Israel, Palestinians kind of take a deep breath and say, well, we should gear up for a round of escalation. And it usually is in Gaza because that's where the blood bank is, right? That's where you can flex your muscles and show that you're the big guy. And this is even more dangerous. What's happening right now is more dangerous. I'm not sure that Netanyahu was thinking about the consequences, but what he has managed to do, in addition to probably saving his own political behind, is to galvanize Palestinian anger across historic Palestine. And this is a scene we have not witnessed since the year 2000. And the feeling of interconnectedness, the colors of our pain as Palestinian may vary. It's a gradient, right? Every group of us has their own struggles and their own crosses to bear. But right now, all of that is coming across in a unified, very loud expression of anger and oneness. And I think that's very significant. And there will be more, developments coming out of this as far as Palestinians are concerned. But talking about having Israeli troops enter into Gaza or even escalate further the violence that is being brought onto Gaza, I mean, in my mind, personally, cannot bear just the idea. This is an area that has been battered continuously for over 14 years. Psychologically, what we're talking about is a population that is trapped with nowhere to go. Oh, you're showing a building that houses a lot of our memories as journalists in Gaza. It housed many media offices, including the AFP and Reuters, I think, at one point, or AP. But anyways, so when there is talk about, more or maybe ground troops in Gaza, we know what that means. We know that now that the death toll will go dramatically higher. Now the pain will increase more. And now the attempt to even reconstruct the pieces, put the pieces back together in Gaza will be all the much more difficult. And to know that this is done for political expediency just makes it all the more difficult, to be honest with you, to swallow, given all this whataboutism that we're hearing.
I'm going to bring in some comments that are in YouTube right now. This is from Mr. Bill. It says, where are the advocates of human rights now? Surprise. Something says the question should be, when will both sides stop launching rockets? Someone else says this is injustice, and everyone standing by is guilty of injustice. Palestine is being crushed and Israel is playing the victim. It is clear to see that Israel won't stop until they've taken everything. I'm curious, Yusuf, how was the Biden administration going to respond to this, and does that change the political calculation happening in Israel now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to understand the situation today, we have to look at sort of how we got to this point in terms of some of the shifts in Israeli politics. And, I absolutely agree with Hakai on the fact that this seems like a very sort of deliberate and calculated process that led us to this point. Even before the original court date for the Sheikh Jarrah families, the Israeli authorities had several opportunities to de-escalate the situation in Jerusalem, and chose time and again the path of escalation and further confrontation with people, closing off public space, shutting off the speakers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, closing access to the Damascus Gate, and ultimately culminating in attacks within the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself, an enraging sight to people all over the world. And I think to understand how we got to this moment, you also have to see the dramatic and increased shift in Israeli politics to the far right. Today, Israeli politics is dominated by right-wing ideologues to an extent that we have never seen before. Really, today in the Knesset, the vast majority of the Knesset seats are held by right-wing ideologues. The choices today are between, the Likud party, Likud Light, Likud Extra, Likud Ultra. It's all various flavors of the same right-wing ideology. This has come to dominate Israeli politics. And we have Kahanists today that are within the Israeli Knesset. And one thing we should keep in mind about Benjamin Netanyahu, he is perhaps unique among Israeli politicians of his stature in his ability to utilize communal violence and to motivate activists into taking extreme measures when his political prospects are in jeopardy. And anybody who watched the role that he played prior to the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in the 1990s knows exactly what he is capable of. So when you ask about the Biden administration, look, Israeli politics has moved in this direction within the context of complete and total impunity because of American policy and protection. When we have sent the message time and again to the Israelis that the more aggressive you get, the more belligerent you get to Palestinians, we're going to continue to reward you with our support and with our cover and with our tax dollars, we've incentivized a race to the right. And that's exactly what happened. The United States has a great degree of complicity in the monster that's been created today. and it's only getting uglier.
Yeah, I have less than a minute, but Biden's got, about 3.5 years to address that. Do you see a change of course in the way the U.S. deals with Israel?
I think there is change that you're starting to hear in conversations about this that's increasingly coming into, the spaces where elected officials exist, but it's not yet with the administration. That said, they may not be in a position to ignore this, particularly as things get more and more violent and ugly, and more people are calling on them to recognize their role in enabling it.
Thank you. Nora,
public opinion in the U.S. is shifting on this, including within Jewish communities. So I think that will also hopefully play a role in getting the administration on board to pushing for active change.
And Nora, I have less than a minute left. What should we look for in the next 24 to 48 hours as we're watching events there?
I think you should look for what happens within Palestinian politics, within Palestinian towns and cities, in the occupied territory and within Israel. This, again, sense of oneness, I think, is something to watch and to keep track of. The youth in Palestine do not recognize these imposed borders, and they are united in their sense of urgent collective action. Regrettably, on the ground, I see nothing but escalation at this point, especially because we have a spineless administration.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll watch this as it develops over the coming hours. Thank you. See you next time.
It's a very bleak picture for a lot of Americans out there.
White supremacy infects all of our institutions.
You're putting more money into the hands of some workers, taking money out of the hands of other workers.
Everyone goes to their camp and it becomes us versus them.
This is a deal about constraining a nuclear program.
The Bottom Line asks the big questions on Al Jazeera. The latest news as it breaks.
More than half of the coal mined by separatists is relabeled as Russian coal and transported out to markets in Asia and Europe.
With detailed coverage.
The foreign troop withdrawal is underway and will be completed after the May 1st deadlines.
From around the world.
What these demonstrators are keen to remind the British government is that any new laws designed to curtail people's right of assembly damage the country's democracy.
What happens when an island built for tourists suddenly has no visitors?
That they should set the clock back to where the U.S. position was over a year ago. What Trump did was he emboldened Netanyahu, and he emboldened the whole idea that more territory could be taken from the Palestinians, that more Palestinians could be kicked out of their homes, deprived of their livelihood, and the part that at some point or another will be deemed sovereign territory of Israel will be expanded.
You probably heard Marwan saying a few moments ago that there is no military solution to this conflict. Where does the UN stand in all of this? Its position has always been the two-state solution. Is that, given all that is currently going on, the politics of Israel at the moment, is that still a viable solution?
I think it has to be. I mean, if there's one state, then the Palestinians have to be treated equally as they are in all modern democracies. They have to be free of discrimination. They have to have freedom of movement within the territory of a single state. Israel certainly doesn't want that, but that's what they would have to do. The alternative is recognition of Palestinian self-determination and the right for Palestine to have its own secure borders. Either one can bring peace, actually, either solution. But the UN has been faithful to the vision that goes back to the 1940s of a two-state solution, and I think that's still widely shared within Israel and Palestine. But if there is a move, as Israel seems to be pushing for what we call one hegemonic state that will absorb parts of the occupied territories, they cannot do that without full recognition of all of the rights of Palestinians within the entire territory. And they don't have that. What they have, Human Rights Watch said it a few weeks ago, is an apartheid state, like South Africa. And we saw where that led. It's not viable in the long run, regardless of military solutions. And we know that the South Africans tried military solutions with the black population in South Africa too. None of that worked. Ultimately, they had to recognize a system of democracy and equal rights and non-discrimination for everybody. That has to be the way forward.
And here's a story we've been tracking. It's being called the most intense hostility in years, the heaviest offensive since the 2014 Gaza war. Thousands of rockets have been exchanged between Israel and Gaza in the last 48 hours. At least 49 people have died. Among them are 13 children and a 32-year-old Indian woman. Buildings are shaking in Gaza. In Israel, there are sirens blaring. The skies are on fire, and the cry of the conflict is being heard as far as India. How did it all start? How did it escalate? Are we staring at another war? We'll discuss all of this in the next 5 minutes. Let's begin by taking a look at what happened in the last 24 hours. It was the night of the heaviest firing since 2014. The Israeli army said 1,050 rockets were fired from Gaza, 1050. At least 850 of them landed in Israeli cities, including Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, Modi'in, and Beersheba. Many rockets were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome system. It stunned the world with images of the air raids. And before we proceed, I want to quickly show you how Israel's Iron Dome works.
Iron Dome is an Israeli anti-missile defense system designed to destroy short-range rockets. Capable of intercepting missiles fired from between 4 and 70 kilometers, it's designed to perform in all weather conditions. The first Iron Dome battery was installed in March 2011 near the southern Israeli city of Beersheba, some 40 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. Several others have been deployed since then. Military experts say 13 systems are required to defend all of Israel. Enemy artillery fired from within a 70-kilometer radius is detected by the defense system's mobile track.
هذه وقفة العيد في القدس وفي حي الشيخ جراح. حال يختلف عن كل العالم. في غزة قصف، في الداخل مواجهات، في الضفة مواجهات، في مناطق معينة، وفي حي الشيخ جراح زي ما انتم شايفين القمع على صعيد المبارك. حتى الآن الأمور هادئة، ما فيش شيء في المسجد الأقصى المبارك. أيضا في باب العمود الأمور هادئة. أي إشي بصير في أي مكان أنا بحطكم بصورة أول بأول. الآن إحنا موجودين في لكم مكان في إفطار رمضاني، من ثم بعد الإفطار صلوا المشاركين صلاة المغرب، من ثم الغائب على أرواح الشهداء في كل مكان في غزة، في الضفة وفي الداخل. من بعد الصلاة بدأوا بالهتافات وبالتكبيرات وبالهتافات والأناشيد، ومن ثم تعرضوا للقمع. هذا المشهد يوم 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 في حي الشيخ جراح، القمع يوم يوم يوم. هي وقفة العيد يا جماعة في حي الشيخ جراح، والأهالي بيقولوا بأنه ما في عيد إلا لما إحنا نضمن إنه إحنا رح نضلنا في حي، هذا الحي المستهدف، هذا الحي اللي الاحتلال بده يخلي كل الفلسطينيين منه ويسقط ويسكر بدال
رمضان كريستيني تعبنا عن سنه كامله فعلا تعبنا.
باب العمود بعد الشهر راح المسجد الاقصى المبارك ما في دين.
نعم كنت في شهر رمضان كان موجود، يعني ما ذهب حدا لانه اللي غاب عن الشيخ جراح كان موجود في المسجد الصغير، غاب عن المسجد الاقصى كان موجود في باب العمود، وهذا هو المهم. يعني هاي الوحده اللي كانت موجوده من زمان، كنا ننادي فيها من زمان. يعني بتذكرنا في البوابات شويه لما كنا نشوف بعض، انا بنطلع في البوابات واصدقاء القدامى اللي بالابتدائي انا شفتهم شهر رمضان، الناس اللي غابوا عن السنين.
هنا كان عشرات الإصابات.
يا الله.
Okay. انت ابن صغار وروح ولا روح انت ابن صغار وروح
Okay. That was from Tel Aviv. Sorry about the focus. It's on autofocus here. Air raid sirens are going on and on. Okay, here we got another Iron Dome coming up. Rising, rising, rising. You can't see. Almost tilting this at a 90-degree angle above my head. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Another one coming in the frame. And another one. Ah, like 4th of July. Okay. Never did see the fireworks on our Independence Day. I think that's enough for now. So, a night in North Tel Aviv. Oh, that's got another air raid siren going on in North Tel Aviv. We had rockets before flying overhead from this direction. I'm facing Ramat Gan and Bnei Brak. And here's to the west towards Tel Aviv. And okay, we got the Iron Dome coming. See that coming up? That's coming up, shooting straight up to the sky. And oh, it's getting close, very close. Oh boy, that's right above me actually. I think I better go inside pretty soon. And that was pretty quiet. Okay, okay, that's another one going.
Israelis and Jewish Israelis living in close proximity turning on each other. Among many violent incidents, on Wednesday a Palestinian man was dragged from his car by dozens of Jewish Israelis who continued to beat him even after he lost consciousness. The video was broadcast live on Israeli television. And closer to Tel Aviv, Palestinian businesses were ransacked. The wave of violence has hit dozens of cities and regions across Israel. It's the worst between communities living alongside each other in decades.
I think we have to go back again to the structural roots and the roots of what is happening today. It is wrong to look at what is happening today only through the lens of the past few days. Again, Israel is a settler colony that has colonized Palestinian land. All Palestinian people are a colonized people, and they have the right to resist, they have the right to be free.
Tension came to a boiling point as a court prepared to rule on the forced expulsion of Palestinian families from their homes in the occupied East Jerusalem Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Israeli journalist Yossi Melman says he's worried about vigilante groups inside Israel running amok. He says they're headed to the abyss as a result of absence of governance and years of incitement. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked both sides to stop the attacks.
Nothing justifies the lynching of Arabs by Jews, and nothing justifies the lynching of Jews by Arabs. It's unacceptable.
In an attempt to quell the violence, Netanyahu ordered the emergency deployment of border forces. But police tactics are under scrutiny after this video was shared on social media of officers storming a family home in the northern city of Haifa. They can be seen beating an unarmed Palestinian Israeli man. And to the south of Tel Aviv, the city of Lod has been put under a state of emergency, the first in an Arab community since 1966. It's been one of the worst hit by riots. On Tuesday night, Jewish cars and a synagogue were set alight. A mosque was burned the next day. And Palestinian Musa Hassouna was shot dead by Jewish residents during protests. Even though the court has postponed the hearing on Sheikh Jarrah, many are now more worried about how to stop the violence caused by anger that's been simmering for much longer. Laura Bowden-Manley, Al Jazeera.
Let's stay with that angle of what's going on there. Feraz Zarek is an artist and musician who was born in Haifa but has Israeli citizenship. He joins us now from Galilee. Feraz Zarek, are the authorities, namely the police, are they willing or able to stop what's going on?
Well, so far what we've seen that they are definitely trying to stop Palestinians from protesting peacefully, but they are not trying to stop new fascist and Zionist extremist group who are trying to lynch Palestinians from doing what they do. And you can see that on social media platforms in Haifa and Lod and most of the mixed towns inside Israel. And what's happening is the direct result of a continuous incitement machine that is caused by this government against Palestinians, Arabs in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. Now, we have to be very clear in highlighting the distinction between an occupier and an occupied. These groups are armed and are backed by the country. Palestinians are not armed and are not backed by the country. We are oppressed, they are not oppressed. So we have to be very articulate about our political terminology. These are not clashes, it's just a continuous ethnic cleansing result.
Mr. Netanyahu is talking about a curfew. Would a curfew be enough to take the temperature out of the anger? I mean, and the anger we're seeing, let's be clear about it, the anger we're seeing is pretty ferocious.
Correct. I think what would really calm is start immediate talks to stop the bombing on Gaza, start immediate talks with Palestinian officials to lift the siege from Gaza, cancel the unethical ethnic cleansing and infections of Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, let Muslims do their prayers in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and really try to prevent these armed groups from lynching Palestinians. I mean, we are unarmed, living peacefully inside Israel. Yes, we are angry. Yes, we are desperate. We are trying to protest that and express it in so many different ways. But they are leaving us no choice. They are the ones who are causing the violence, and we are helpless right now. And the only thing that is causing us to be united is our strong belief in our deep and just struggle. I mean, we are an extension of people living in Gaza and living in the West Bank and Jerusalem, even though each category has different, means of struggle and different circumstances. But eventually, there's one military institution that inciting against us continuously 24/7, and it's sowing fear in the heart of Israelis. So I want to call on all the rational Israelis to join Palestinians inside Israel under one slogan: end the apartheid, end the war, and stop the bombing. Only then, maybe, we can have some real talk.
But the amount and the force of the anger that we are seeing on the streets of Israel, this is neighbour to neighbour, in effect. This is people who've lived cheek by jowl. I assume, correct me if I've got this wrong here, I assume they've lived in close proximity for generations. And that anger doesn't come from no place. It doesn't spontaneously come into existence in a vacuum. So it must have been there anyway.
That's correct. However, it might be misleading because, yes, there are mixed cities between Palestinians and Israeli Jews. However, there are Arab ghettos in all the meaning they have zero budgets, close to zero budgets. You can see the difference in budgets and infrastructure in the street. There is a huge rate of crime. And if you go to a Israeli kibbutz or a yeshuv or a whatever town, you can see the difference in the infrastructure. So there is a daily struggle of systematic racism against Palestinians living in Israel. So this anger doesn't come from, just a spontaneous vacuum. Now, yes, we are used to being together in universities, in different institutions, at work, at hospitals, restaurants even. So it's a different kind of dynamic between us. However, whenever this kind of clashes happens, the Israeli media institution is trying continuously to add fuel to the fire by inciting against Palestinians and really throw a lot of misinformations for Israelis. So it's easy to control the masses when you sow fear in their hearts. That's what I have to say.
Given that anger has been there for a long time, clearly on both sides, could this be yet the beginning of the end of coexistence, in effect, Israelis and Palestinians who coexist inside Israel?
I believe in coexistence. I have struggled all my life towards coexistence. However, coexistence has to come with equality, political equality and dignity, and social equality and dignity for all Palestinians living from the river to the sea, in the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel. I mean, this continuous talk about different kinds of Palestinians inside Israel, in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in Gaza, is only making things more sophisticated, when, in fact, the equation is quite simple. I see no obstacle for coexistence as long as people have their dignity, people have their equality. I mean, nobody wants to see violence. People in Gaza are not interested in this bombing, but they are fleeing hell. They have 4 hours of electricity and water per day. They have a huge amount of unemployment, polluted water. I mean, it's the most populated area on the planet, basically. It's one big concentration camp. So if you compare that to someone living in Tel Aviv, it's a totally different equation. It's a totally different conversation to have. So first, let's try to make things right and then talk about coexistence. I still believe in coexistence. I want coexistence, but in return of what? In exchange of what? Who has to give up more of their rights anyway?
OK, we must leave it there. Faraz Reik, thank you so much for joining us from Galilee.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Still to come here on the News Hour for you. The cyber attack on a US pipeline that's exposed just how vulnerable American companies are to future attacks. And remembering their heritage, we look back at the history of the Aztec Empire, now called Mexico City. And Novak Djokovic stretches his quarterfinal record at the Rome Masters. That's in sport. Coming up with Joe in about 15 minutes.
Hello, let's get, yep.
المفروض السعفات تخش جوا على طول. طيب رقنص في تو شهيد من طريق بيع. اقول لك يا حسين انا جاء هذاك الصار كان جميل استقبلوا طبعا كان جايين هذا طبعا شوارع ايوه يا عم الكواشيك خلص ايوه هذا طرش
شوف يا سعد روح
دير مرة شوف المرة هذه جوزة مستغني عنها جوزة مستغني عنها صار جوزة بعد صار بيتجوز الله أعلم بيتجوز
الشاعر مصر على حدود مكة
جابوا جيب كشوف
العالم هناك راح نقصري هذا بعض
والله عم عندما كله ملف البديل
في بنزين
ليه هو كيف؟
لا ما هي بزوقها بتضلها داخله وبدها تلبسوها طب روح انت
الله ما ابوها وقفت عاد صاحب الهندسه ايه فرق فيها يوسف والله صادق
هاي شايف هاي جابلهم البنزين
الله يكون الصح أخضر لا 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 والله يا الله صميم هذا عليه صعيدة ايوه خليه يضل قاعد صاب احمد مين هذول
الله يعميهم عنك الله يحماك
الله تكبير
حيروح الناس